Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm showing you two Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 600 models, and that's a bit of a mouthful. So we've got the Mk2, which is the red bezel black dial variant, and the Mk3, which is the blue dial and blue bezel variant. Both in stainless steel. These are the larger of the options. So this one is the 43 diameter and this is the 42 diameter. Now, I'm sure you've probably seen a bunch of videos on either of these in your research so far, so I'm not going to bore you with all of the specifications, although I will share some of the specs and, more importantly, I think, my opinion of some of the advantages and disadvantages of both of these. Now, before we begin, I want to show you quickly the difference in packaging. So originally, in fact, I'll put this there. Originally, Christopher Ward's used to come in this sort of size box back when the Mk2 was available. It is quite a decent box, but it is firstly very, very large and not very interesting. They've got limited branding on there. It's not very exciting. It is huge. So perhaps if you only have one watch and that's where you want to keep it, fine. But I expect a lot of us enthusiasts will have a bunch of watches and it's impossible to keep them all in boxes like this. So to some extent, Christopher Ward did listen and they did come up with a new box design for when the Mk3 came out. And this is far better quality. It's got this nice leather top. I believe it's probably vegan leather or something like that now. You've got an embossed logo. You've got bamboo as well, and you've got all of your typical Christopher Ward goodies like your polishing cloth. You've got a little card to commemorate the charity donation that they made for all purchases of this particular model and so on. So it is a nice package, but it is still a little bit large and a bit awkward to store, in my opinion. I do keep like watch straps and things in something like this, so it is quite useful to have around. And more importantly, it does feel a lot more premium than the previous version. So looking at the specs, first of all, if we have a look at the red Mk2, I'll just show you this page of the manual in case you weren't aware already. This is the 43mm diameter case. It's a height of 13.3mm, a weight of 104. I believe that's just the head of the watch. The water resistance is 600 meters. It's powered by a Sellita SW200-1. And we've got, it doesn't say the power reserve on here, but I believe the power reserve is around 40 hours. We've got a lug-to-lug of 51.5 and a strap size of 22. So large dive watch there. Now, when the Mk3 came out, they scrapped the 43 diameter size and they introduced a few sizes for this model, actually. I went for the largest one, which is 42. I have quite large wrists and I think a dive watch should be quite large anyway. There is the 40 size and 38 size. I'd say out of all of them, the 40 is probably the most commonly bought because that suits most people's wrists. I don't believe I have ever seen a 38 on any kind of Facebook group post or anything. I think they are really small and you do start to lose some of the balance of like the bracelet against the case. I think the 42 is actually the nicest looking overall anyway for those reasons. Now, in the new manual, you don't get quite as many specs, interestingly. So if I bring that a bit closer so you can see, same movement, same stainless steel, although they don't actually mention what kind of steel it is. Perhaps they mention it somewhere else. We've got 42, 40 and 38 sizes. It's a little lighter now. The water resistance is the same, vibrations is the same, everything's the same. We have a blue or black dial variant, and of course you've got super luminova lume. You don't get as many sizes on here, but I expect the lug to lug, obviously the strap length, all of that, strap width, sorry, is all going to be very similar. Now, if we look at the Mk2 first, in some detail, I'll zoom in so you can see the dial a bit more clearly. Now, one thing that drew me to those 2 years ago, I was looking for a luxury style watch for not much money, and this one was very well regarded online, especially on YouTube. I saw everybody talking about this. It seemed to be making waves, no pun intended with the wave dial, but it was making waves online, and especially in this combination, this red bezel black dial variant, I believe was the nicest of the lot. I especially like the dial sort of layout on this. I don't mind that the logo is at 9 o'clock. I know a lot of people complain about that, but actually I really like the dial design. The applied indices are nice and simple. We've got these little green markers on the minute track as well. You've got a nice date window surround, nice clear date, very legible, lots of contrast. The one thing I didn't really like about the dial though was the wave pattern. It looks cool on the website, but in real life, you know, this is literally the only position you ever see it. The rest of the time it looks like this, completely black. So I thought, why bother with that really? They could have done something a bit more interesting. Now the handset, they are reminiscent of another watch. I believe it's a Bremont. So yeah, you can see they've taken their styling cues from other brands here. I like the counterbalance for the seconds hand, that Trident spear on the back, which is very nice and prominent. So it does very much have its own identity. Moving out to the bezel, this is, I believe, in a bit of an Omega style. The bezel action is very loud, first of all, very clicky. It's very functional. There's very little back play, although it does move a little bit. But yeah, it is very loud and a little bit cheap sounding, to be honest, but not cheap feeling. Now, that's one thing I was hoping they would improve in the new model, and I'll come to that later. The case itself, quite a nice profile, nothing particularly exciting. It has high polish on the lugs here, which is a bit annoying because when you try and fit the bracelet, you can scratch it quite easily. We've got brushed on the sides, and again, quite slab-sided, quite chunky. And I'll give you a wrist shot in a second as well. Once I've gone through everything, you've got the sloped bezel. Remember, ceramic bezel with a little lume pip at the top as well. There's lots of lume on the face of the watch, which I will show you later as well. The bracelet. Now, this is one of my disappointments, really. It looks very cool initially, but then you realize that actually the polished center links, they are a scratch magnet, and that is magnified because they are also raised. So if you look carefully, you'll see that the middle links are raised up. The bracelet is very comfortable, and it's adjustable as well, which is a really nice feature for a watch like this. If you ever look down here, you can see this mechanism, so I can actually, without really pressing anything, just push it in if it's too loose, and if I need to loosen it a bit, I can reach under there and stretch it back out, and there's a few settings there, but this moves it by about half a link, which is really useful. That every dive watch, or to be honest, every watch should have that. So the bracelet itself is very comfortable. It is incredibly hard to remove, but I will show you actually right now what this looks like on a Hirsch strap, which I've got. So I've done a quick strap change here to show you what the Mk2 looks like on the Hirsch Arnie strap. So this is probably my favorite rubber style strap, and far better in my opinion than the offerings from Christopher Ward. It is a sort of nice, super smooth, super nice feeling sailcloth style top with a rubber backing. Now, it is mostly rubber, and this, on the pictures especially, does not look very comfortable at all, but trust me, when you try this strap out, it is fantastic. I actually bought it originally from another watch, or for another watch, should I say, but I'm sometimes wearing it on the Trident. It is quite tricky to get on and off, unfortunately. It doesn't have the quick release pins like you do get on the Christopher Ward straps. I'll give you a quick wrist shot now, but this is my favorite rubber style strap. I think they come in a few different colors, but unfortunately nothing just plain, it's always got either a black side or a, I think, brown side. There's a few colors, they're probably adding more as we go, but it is fantastic. So I'll do you a quick wrist shot. So there you go, on wrist. It is really nice and flexible. It's got the nice Hirsch polished clasp as well, or buckle. And yeah, I think it goes really quite nicely. I wish perhaps it didn't have the black so much on the side, that way it would fit more watches. It fits this one quite well because of the black dial as well. So there you go, that's just a quick wrist shot to show you what a different strap might look like on one of the Tridents. Okay, we're back, and I'm now going to show you it on wrist with the Bracelet to give you a bit of a comparison. Now the Bracelet, I'm always choosing bracelets over strap options. For watches, especially of this type, I think a dive watch should not be on a leather strap, really. So the only option is rubber, and as I showed you, that Hirsch strap was brilliant. One thing I did notice, which is a bit different to other watches I've owned, is the clasp is actually really large, which makes it quite good, because actually a lot of your scratches happen here and it's very easy to polish them out on this large clasp. I guess it's done to protect the bracelet and also give you that flexibility of moving it in and out. Now this watch is quite large, so I'll get into a slightly more comfortable position to show you it. Sits well against my wrist. My wrists are around 7 3/4, almost 8 inch, so I have large wrists and hands. So of course, if you have a more normal size, you might want to go for the smaller model if possible. So there you go. So key things I wish this watch had or didn't have. Yeah, the bracelet is one of my main complaints. The bezel was also a little bit cheap sounding, and you know, I've been lucky enough to try bezels on things like Tudors, and they are incredible. So, you know, my wish list would be to have a Tudor type bezel on here, maybe 60 click and much more refined style. Yes, an oyster style bracelet, but a bracelet without this awkward higher middle link, less polishing. The movement is perfectly adequate for this watch. It does mean it is, of course, Swiss made. It's going to last a long time. One piece of advice though, do not wind this very much. So when you come to wind it, if it's been in your watch box for a while, just, the threading on the crown is generally okay. I think I just clicked it a bit too far there. When you just give it a few winds to get it going, and that's it, because you can get the rotor. There's some issue with the collar, I think it is, for the winding. So it's very easy to overwind it, or not overwind it, but actually damage something. So you end up just rotating the rotor. Anyway, this is something that I've had a problem with, but actually it's now gone away. So I decided not to bother sending it to Christopher Ward, but they did offer to, of course, return it and look at it. So the 2824 movement is good. It's perfectly adequate for this watch, but it isn't the best movement in the world for little niggles like that, which you will find if you have a look on the forums for problems with it. The case back, I don't think I showed you before, is really nicely deep engraved. And a lot of these features carry over to the new model, which is of course expected as an update. It's not a completely different model, it is an update. So let's have a look at this one now. Now, I already mentioned it is now 42 in diameter, but the size is not very noticeably different from the 43. So if you're wondering if it's going to be too small or something, I'm holding them literally at the same distance from the camera here, and you probably can't tell which is larger or smaller. Obviously the dial colors combinations probably impact that a little bit. Now the key differences with this, if we start on the dials, I'll zoom in. All the markers on the blue one are a little bit fatter, which gives it these kind of beaver teeth at 12, which I'm not a huge fan of, to be honest. The hands I prefer on the old model as well. Even the counterbalance is larger, the Trident logo balance is a bit larger on the old model, as you can see as it's coming around here as well. In fact, let me zoom in so it's even clearer. So yeah, dial wise, I think in some ways the old one wins. However, I do like that the new one is a more sort of glossy, almost glossy sort of satin finish. There's lots of fingerprints on it, apologies. More sort of, not hugely glossy, but a bit of a satin finish, and it's got the twin flag logo at 12. The printing is somewhat clearer because it's not got the waves anymore, and I didn't particularly like the waves anyway. The markers are all very good. There's nothing offensive about the blue one, it's just I kind of preferred the markers on the original one. And also we've lost the green color on the minute track. The date window is still framed, although it's not a applied frame, it's just a printed rectangle now. And the date wheel is black on this particular model, but I'm not sure if that's the case for all of them. Now moving outwards is the bezel. Now the bezel is still ceramic, however now the bezel is also loomed. So this is a great opportunity for me to show you what the loom looks like. I'm not going to be able to turn the lights off completely in here, so what I'm going to do is just shine a UV light that I have on this loop on these watches, and you should be able to see a little bit where the loom is at least, and that it does glow quite bright even in regular sort of well lit areas. So you can see it's glowing green on there, and on the Mark II it is of course only in the middle, with the exception of the loom pip as well. Now loomed bezels, I think they look cool. I'd always choose a watch with a loomed bezel over a non-loomed bezel. However, realistically, you only ever see it maybe for like a few seconds when you drive into a tunnel. If you drive a convertible, that happens a lot, and you notice the loom on your watch. Or if you go to a nightclub where the UV lights, like my little light here, will show up the loom. It's not a deal breaker for me. I know a lot of people like it though. But yeah, we've lost the loom pip, which makes it look a bit more modern as well. So you can see that this is a more classic sort of design, whereas this is a more contemporary design. So that's the bezel look. However, there is of course a change with the bezel action as well. Let's see if I can show you a comparison. I'm going to just go to 15 minutes this way. Okay, and then now the new one. I'd say the new one sounds a lot better than the previous one. Now with the new one, you do get a bit more play. I'm trying to hold the watch as firmly as I can there. It's kind of the same, maybe a little bit more sloppy. I did have a problem with the first one of these, which got delivered to me, in that the bezel wasn't seated correctly, and you could actually see the teeth underneath between the coin edge and the case. And that was a bit of a shame because I had to spend another month or so waiting for a replacement. And I actually had to point this out specifically to Christopher Ward, who didn't, well, not him personally, but the technicians there didn't notice my problem straight away, and I thought it was dead obvious. I noticed it because as I was turning this, it would then suddenly go silent and then come back. I can't replicate it on this one because this one is fine. But in my opinion, the bezel action is greatly improved over the red one. If you like a loud, more defined bezel, perhaps this style is for you. But this to me feels a bit crunchy and a bit cheap compared to the new model now as well. So that is the front of the watch effectively. The case on the new blue one is far more interesting. We've got a lot more chamfered edges and bevels and a few differences in polishing here and there. The thickness of both watches is actually the same, but if you have a look right next to each other, the one on the right is the exact same thickness as the one on the left, or very, very close. The key things they've done here is they've made the bezel slope a little bit more. If you have a look at this bezel edge compared to the red one, you can see more of the numbers on it. We've also got the same kind of coin edge bezel, but that is lower down now. and that allows the case and the lugs here to be a little bit more flat. If I put this one down and we can have a better look solely on this one, you'll see they've also polished the sort of underside elements of the case, which again make it a lot more bright and reflective, and they call this the light capture case. And it does look a lot more slender and feel a lot more slender in person. It's also lighter because I guess they've taken away some material. The crowns are, I believe, the same. Yeah, pretty much exactly the same. I think they even have the same. Oh, actually, no, I believe the blue has just a few more of the teeth around the edge of the crown. So a bit more of a coin edge, but minor differences which you won't really notice. Moving on from the case then, oh, by the way, the case back is essentially the same, but the kind of engraved part is just slightly less deep than on this one. If you have a look at that one, there's a bit more going on. They've got the waves there, whereas on this one it is more plain, and they've actually updated the Trident logo, and that is the same on the hands as well. Now, moving on from the case, we've got the bracelet. This is a huge improvement for me. You can probably already tell why. This no longer has the polished center link, and it is completely flat now as well. So there is no step in between it. I guess that means we scratch everything now rather than just the middle, but I think this is more appropriate for a dive style watch because it is supposed to be a tool watch at the end of the day. You can also tell as well, if I hold it like this, it goes from 22. The thickness of the bracelet doesn't really change a huge amount. It does taper in, I believe, to around maybe 18 or 19, but it's visually more appealing because of these slanted kind of edges, and the middle links are thicker than the previous one. So if we have a look in comparison, you'll see the new bracelet is a lot cleaner looking. I think this looks much better, and especially on the 42mm case. On the smaller cases, it starts to look a little odd, I think, with the size of the case, but with this one, it looks great. So yeah, great improvement in the bracelet, but that's not the only improvement. The clasp is the same, nice big buckle. I think the clasps look slightly different. The new one has the kind of extra edges here to make it line up with the mid links, and the old one didn't. And we've now got these oblong shaped pushes rather than the circles. And we've also lost all of the pinholes down the left and right sides. So actually this is a much nicer, neater option. So yes, another win there. But more importantly than that, my favorite feature is the quick release. So if you do like to change your straps, all you need to do is reach under here and pull on these two pins. I'm going to try and demonstrate it flawlessly now. There we go. So as you can see, it is so easy to remove the bracelet. Now, here's the tricky part, is to try and put it back in on camera in one go. And have I done it? Not quite. Try that again. There, back again. So I hadn't had much practice of that, by the way, and it managed to do it really quite quickly. This one is an absolute nightmare to change the bracelet on. I have scratched it up a bit, I have damaged a bunch of tools trying to do it. It is a real pain in the ass. So yeah, for ease of use, definitely the new one as well. So that kind of brings me to the end of this video, in that I will summarize the main advantages and disadvantages. Firstly, the Trident line itself is a fantastic line. Christopher Ward brand is brilliant. You get 5 years of warranty on either of these. So any movement issues you might have, like I had, any bezel issues or fitting issues or anything like that, they will sort you out. So they are very good. I 100% recommend this. This is my benchmark watch now. Whenever I go and shop for a new watch, I always think, well, is it better than the Trident? And actually there's very few that are, especially micro brand or smaller brand watches, the kind of watches you might see in your high street shops. This absolutely, you know, beats all of them. So keep an eye out for new models being released. I know there's an elite version of this, which I really like the sound of. I've heard that the bezel action on that is even better. It's got a day date, it's a better movement and so on, COSC certification. But as a sort of starter, well, it's still quite expensive, but as a starter dive watch that has absolutely everything, you cannot go wrong with either of these. It's just a question of whether you like the older, sort of more blingy style with the polishing, or you like the more utilitarian but also quite dressy new style. And of course you can dress this up easily by changing the strap as well. So one last bit of advice though, if you are going to be buying these, keep an eye on eBay. Sometimes they have sellers there, but more importantly, from their website, do not pay full price. I have never paid full price for a Christopher Ward, and I don't intend to. This one I got as a nearly new watch for 30% off. This one I got using a code which worked out about 20% off. Do not ever buy them for the full price. I wish they didn't do this, but they always have sales and things like that to keep an eye on. And join the Facebook group called Christopher Ward Enthusiasts, because lots of extra pictures, help, info on Christopher Ward on that. So I almost finished the video without showing you a wrist shot of the blue watch. So here we go. It does hug the wrist really nicely. It is a really good fit on my let's say 7 3/4 inch, roughly 19.5 centimeter, 20 centimeter wrist. On the side profile, it does appear slimmer, especially from this angle, which is the angle you are most likely to look at it. And because of that extra sloped bezel and that spacing underneath, it really hugs the wrist a lot better. So that is my wrist shot, and we'll carry on. That's it, guys. Thank you for joining me for this amount of time. I did have 2 watches to show you. I tried to go through them in as much detail, sharing a lot of my opinion here. Please give me a thumbs up and please subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.